Hello, guys. We're going to jump right into chapter 30 today. Okay. When the door opened the next morning to the Ferny Creek Library, the Ferny Creek Elementary School Library, soon to be known as the Louisa May Cavendish Memorial Library, a brand new squisher walked in. Kabang! Eddie and Alfie peeked around the desk leg. The new squisher was short and slim, and to Eddie's eyes, quite young. He had large, dark eyes and round glasses and a neat cap of short black hair. Eddie saw all in a second, but the thing he really noticed was his man's vest. He wore over a crisp white shirt, and the thing Eddie noticed was how green it was. The vest was a rich, shiny green. Kabang! The principal burst through the door, breathing hard. Thank you so much for coming, Mr. Banerjee. We're going to call him, Banerjee. We've lost 2 librarians in the last week, and we're quite desperate. The squisher smiled. I'm happy to help. Well then, here we are. The principal gestured around. The books, the carpet, the desk, and so on. Is it all right? All right, said the squisher. Yes, it looks fine. Not too crowded with books? Oh no, not at all. The squisher's voice was low and pleasant. Plenty of room for more books, I say. Oh, said the principal, glancing around. He stared at a half-empty bookshelf. Well, that's odd. Do you have any questions? But the squisher was already taking himself on a tour. Pointing at the desk, he smiled. Beautiful wood. He bent to touch the carpet. Good and thick. Sitting on the comfy couch, he bounced it a couple of times. Then he patted the cushions. I like bright colors in the library. Don't you? Standing again, he wandered to the bookshelves. He bent to peer at the titles. He ran his hands over the spines. Some excellent new books here, he said, pulling one out from the shelf. Someone's taken a lot of care. Oh, yes, said the principal. That was our Miss Laurel. She cared a great deal about books, and she wanted the very best. I can see that, said the squisher. As he turned from the shelf, something caught his eye. Is that Miss Cavendish's cabinet? He asked. Oh, dear. The principal wrung his hands. How did you hear about that? My wife, said the squisher, smiling. She went to school here. She knew Miss Cavendish and was fond of her. I've heard all the stories. You have? The principal's voice sounded strangled. Oh, yes. Even that last day in the library when you know. The squisher let his head drop slowly forward. Oh, said the principal. That. Yes. A long pause followed. The principal took a deep breath. You're not, that is to say, you're not afraid of ghosts, are you? The squisher laughed. Ghosts? Do you mean Miss Cavendish? He laughed again. I don't believe in ghosts, Mr. Steeman. That is, Miss Cavendish ever comes calling in this library, I will be tickled pink to meet her. And if she brings Charlotte Bonte, all the better. Charlotte? Oh, you mean the dog? The principal chucked happily. Yes, of course. All wonderful nonsense, isn't it? I'm glad you're so sensible, especially after, never mind that. I just want you to know that we're happy to have you here, Mr. Banerjee. Welcome to Ferny Creek. He took the squisher's hand for an extra long time. Then he left with the spring in his step. I like the new squisher, said Alfie. Let's wait and see, said Eddie. The squisher did sound good. He liked the couch, he liked the books, he liked the library ghosts. But Eddie's thoughts were still on Aunt Min. It was hard to concentrate. The first class to meet the new squisher was second grade. They stared at him with courtesy as they sat on the storytime carpet. Eddie and Alfie watched from behind the desk leg. You can call me Mr. B if you like, said the squisher. B for books, thought Eddie. A child raised a hand. How long are you staying? Good question, Eddie whispered to Alfie. That's what I wanted to ask. I don't know, said the squisher. Right now, I'm here for the day. He held up a book. Has anyone read this book? Do you recognize the cover? No one spoke. The squisher started to read. When Mr. Frederick C.'s little second son was born, everybody noticed that he was not much bigger than a mouse. Eddie jumped, his whole body saying, was it possible? Out of all the books in the library, Mr. B had chosen Stuart Little? It was a sign. Suddenly, Eddie knew the complete certainty who this squisher was going to be. Mr. B wasn't just an ordinary squisher. Mr. B was the new librarian. Alfie seemed to know it too. Come on, he told Alfie. Let's get closer. And once again, Alfie did the unthinkable. Risking his life and Eddie's too, he charged right into the open. No! Hollered Eddie, but it was too late. All he could do was dash after his brother, who had already reached the octopus thing where all the wires met up. By the time Eddie got there, Alfie had sprinted away again. Eddie finally caught up at the wastebasket near the storytime chair. He tackled his brother and dragged him out of sight. Thank goodness for Stuart Little. Once Alfie was pinned down, Eddie looked around. To his enormous relief, he discovered that nobody, not one single child, was looking at him or Alfie. Everyone was looking at Mr. B, and Mr. B was, of course, looking at Stuart Little. So nobody saw Eddie and Alfie, but from their new position, they could peek around the wastebasket and have a perfect view of the children's faces. Here's what they saw. The children's eyes were wide, their chins were lifted, their mouths were slightly open. They were only doing what any squisher does when listening to a story, of course. But Eddie had never seen it so close before. He also noticed how the children were sitting. Some of them leaned against a friend or threw an arm over another child's shoulders. A boy at the end flung his legs out straight and leaned back on his elbows. Noticing this, Alfie flung out his legs too. And Eddie? He leaned forward, listening to Stuart with every molecule in his body. And as he listened, he forgot about being in the library, about chasing a naughty brother, about having an aunt in a drawer. He forgot all his worries and problems. He even forgot about being a bug. For the time he was listening, Eddie was a mouse like Stuart Little, living with an ordinary family in a pleasant house in New York City. The new librarian's voice was warm and inviting. Even better, he could change it in an instant to a voice of the characters in the story. Kids' voices, ladies' voices, and very believable mouse voice for Stuart Little. Mr. B didn't just read the story, he became the story. Aunt Min was right. This was magic. All right, guys, come back for chapter 31. See you guys later.